Now, I've talked about this before on some videos, but it seems to keep popping up. Pretty much every time I do a range video, somebody gets on there and says, hey, your 3-shot group is statistically irrelevant. And unless you're shooting a 30-shot group, you're kind of wasting your time. At which time I say, I am not shooting 30-shot groups. That is ridiculous. And then we go back and forth and then it's dropped. Now, most of the people that comment, they're being very civil and it's fine, but it continually pops up. So the main reason I'm making this video is so I have a reference. In the future, I'm just gonna put a link in the comments so they can go watch this particular video. Like I said, I do have some people that comment on my videos, but not a whole lot. But some other YouTubers that are bigger that I know personally get tons of comments. And basically every time that you make a range video, you get these comments. So I'm gonna set the record straight. I'm gonna show you today why it is valid and it does mean something. Now, just as a quick setting the stage, this information has been out there a long time. It's nothing new. But I think most of it has come from, most of the buzz has come from the Hornady podcast. And they had a video called Group Sizes. They had a follow-up. They had another video where they answered questions. And they've kind of went back and forth with some F-class shooters. And a little bit of arguments here or there, but it definitely sparked some interest in the subject. I will say I love the Hornady podcast, and I really liked those episodes in particular. I've learned a lot from watching a lot of the episodes that Hornady's done about ballistics. So I am a big fan, and I agree with 99.8 of what they said on those particular episodes. The problem is how we as the viewer are deciphering it. For instance, if you listen to them very closely, they'll tell you, we're not saying we know all the answers. We're not saying that we couldn't be wrong. We're saying this is what we have seen in our results. We're simply offering to you our results, our scientific results. And here's our hypothesis, and here's what we think you should know. Very good podcast, very helpful information. They also said multiple times, especially Jaden Quinlan, I believe is his name, you do with this what you will. It's up to every person to take this information and decipher it in the way that it's going to apply to them. So I have no beef with Hornady, with their podcast, with those episodes, and I pretty much agree that a 30-shot group is way more relevant than a 3-shot group or a 5-shot group. Statistically, scientifically, yes, of course. But the comment is, your 3-shot group doesn't mean anything. You're simply wasting your time unless you shoot a 30 or at least a 20-shot group, then there's no point to what you're doing. That's the comment that I'm addressing specifically. Is there any point in doing a 3-shot group? And the answer is yes, of course. It's data. Anytime you collect data, it's relevant. And if you get nothing else from this entire video and you tune off right after I say this, at least get this one point, it's got to be repeatable. And so if I shoot a 3-shot group and I get a nice group with a good SD and a good ES, I do need to see if it's repeatable. And if I never try it out again, and then I go make 200 rounds of that, and then years later, I shoot it again, or I'm hunting with it, and it doesn't perform like I thought it did based on that one little sample size, then yeah, that's on me. You do need to see if it's repeatable, but you got to start somewhere. I'm going to focus more on the practicality side of this later, but first I want to delve into the actual numbers and actual data. But I will say this, there is no way that I am going to shoot 30 shots for every grain of increase of powder that I am shooting. Or every time I move the seating depth by 20 or 50 thousandths difference, I'm going to shoot a 30-shot group. That's insane, people. And they even made that comment on the Hornady podcast. They said, we don't expect you guys to do this. But I'll focus more on the practicality side later. But let's specifically bring up this one slide here. I'm going to pop it up on the screen. This was from their slide, and they introduced this as evidence. They're basically saying For 3-shot groups at 100 yards, let's say you get an inch, okay? You shoot a 3-shot group and your group size is an inch, which simply means your extreme spread is 1 inch. Then you do that 10 more times, which would get you a more valid sample size of 30. What is the variable? Like how much is it gonna waver? Is it gonna be an inch every time? Of course not. Which, by the way, anyone who shot knows the more you shoot, the bigger the group's gonna get. That's just common sense. Anyone knows if you shoot 5-shot groups, they're gonna be a little bit bigger than 3-shot groups, for the most part. If you shoot a 10-shot group, it's going to be bigger than a 3-shot group or a 5-shot group. That's common knowledge. But according to this slide, you shoot 10 of those 3-shot groups. Are you going to get an inch group every time? No. You're going to get variance. And they're basing this all off a 30-shot group because in their studies, a 30 to 35-shot group is just where things seem to be a good estimation of how it's going to be. 20, not so much. 50, it's not really changing a whole lot. So 30 to 35. So they do 10 3-shot groups, and they say you're going to have a variability of 60 to 70%, okay, on a 3-shot group. Then he goes down the list and he shows you the bigger your group size, the less the variability is. 100% agree with their findings, and I say absolutely. But think about that. With a 1-inch group at 100 yards, you do it 10 times and your average is 1 inch. That means you could have a 0.3-inch group or a 1.7-inch group. That's going by 70% variability, not even 60. I'm going to the extreme here. 70% means when you shoot a 1-inch group, there's a chance if I shoot that again, I could get a 0.3-inch group. There's also a chance I could get a 1.7-inch group. So based on that, I'm going to put this up on the screen here. I have 5 little targets here that I drew on a piece of paper very crudely. And I shot 5 3-shot groups, all at 100 yards. First group was 1.75 inches. Second group was 2.5. Third group was 1 inch. Fourth group was 1.5 inches. And then the last group was 2 inches. Now, basing what we read off Hornady's findings, there's a 70% variance potential, which means with that 1.7-inch group, if I shot it, if we did this 10 more times and 1.75 being the average, you could get all the way down to a 0.5-inch group, half minute of angle, all the way up to a 2.975. With that second group, 2.5 inches, you could go from a 0.75 all the way to a 4.25. Like we just said, the 1-inch group, 0.3 all the way up to 1.7. The 1.5-inch group, 0.45 up to 2.55. And then the last 2-inch group, a 0.6-inch group all the way up to 3.4. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you another little thing here on the screen. Here's an example of what we're talking about. You shoot 3 shots, it's a 1-inch group at 100 yards. But then look at the bottom. The 3 dots that are shaded are the same 3 from above. We just shot 27 more times. And now your 30-inch group looks more like a circle and is much bigger, okay? And in this particular one, I have it at like 2.5 inches, which is way beyond what they said is the potential average variance. But just to kind of show you what they're talking about. So yeah, you know, those 3 shots could be any one of those 30 anytime I shoot. And so yeah, there's a big variance. We call it a flyer, but it could be just the variance, all right? It could be whatever. And speaking of flyers, I'm going to get to that in a second, but when it comes to variables, there is so many variables that I don't know that I could even list them, of potentially microscopic little tiny things that could happen that could cause that dispersion to be bigger. But this is from Hornady. They're in their laboratory, in their indoor range with no wind. Climate and condition is perfectly suited for what they're trying to do. And and they have this giant barrel, probably in a fixture, and they're doing these tests. So as far as you could possibly get, all the variables were taken out. Okay, it doesn't mean there's not still variables, because there obviously is in the ammunition and a lot of other things. But for all intents and purposes, let's just say for this part of the video that all the variables are taken out. There's no bad shots by the shooter, no wind, no atmospheric issues. All the variables are gone. This is just the performance of the ammo. Having said all that, if you shot those 5 groups, which one would you go with? Of course you'd go with the 1 inch. I understand you could shoot the same 5 groups again, and they could be different. And within that window of variance, they might overlap. And the 2 inch over here to the right, you know, it could be as good as 0.60 based on the average. And my 1 inch could be as bad as 1.7 on the next time. So I understand that every time you shoot it, it could be different and you could overlap. And then, you know, I fully get that. But which one of those 5 are you going to go with? But once again, you need to repeat it. You need to do it again. Would I shoot all 5 of those again? I would not. I would simply shoot the 1 or 2 that I thought were the best and see if it repeats. Now, say I shot another 3-shot group, and yeah, it shot 1.2 inches. Would I freak out? No. I probably would shoot it again, and then if, say, it shot 0.8, well, I'm thinking, okay, minute of angle. If I shot 1.5 and then I shot it again and it was 0.5, that's all within the realms of the variance. I would still think it was 1 inch. But now if I shot it again and it was 3 inches, then I would say, okay, something ain't right here. I need to figure out what is going on. But to act like a 3-shot group is meaningless is nonsense. You would pick the 1 inch group and see if it repeats itself. That's common sense. It's not a waste of time. It does show you something. And within those average variances, it's the way to go. But if it doesn't repeat itself, then you need to go back to square one. Now, if you go back to their slide, even getting down there to 30, a 30-shot group, there's still like a 20% variability. So even with a 30-shot group, you shoot, 10 more 30-shot groups, you still have a chance of variability. Of course, it's not as big. Of course, it's going to be more accurate to what the gun's actually capable of. Absolutely. There's always going to be some variance, okay? There's always going to be the potential that it doesn't do what you want it to. Which leads me to the second and final point, practicality. If you have the resources, every time you want to do load development, to get, let's say, 5 different loads, a grain difference each, and you're going to go out there and you have the ability and the money and the time to load up 30 rounds for each, and then go shoot 150 rounds just to see the difference in these 5 grain increment differences of powder. If you can do that, by all means, have fun. I'm excited for you. There is no way I would ever do that. And don't forget, you still have variance. There's still a 20% chance it's going to be outside of that. It could be 20% bigger than your 30-shot group. It could be 20% smaller than your 30-shot group. So you've not nailed nothing down, but you of course, you'd have a more precise way of doing it. But here's the thing. Not only the amount of money you're spending, a 30-shot group, are you going to just burn your barrel to the ground? You got to let that thing cool down. You know how long that's going to take? This is real life. We're not in that Hornady lab. We don't have access to the things that they have access to. You're burning your barrel out. You're wasting time. You're wasting money. And for what? To get a little bit of a percentage more accurate test result? Come on. But here's the thing. There are going to be flyers. Eric Cortina has said on one of his podcasts before that he has won national championships. He's won all around the world as an F-class shooter. He has everything you could want as far as equipment, on reloading, the knowledge in his mind, the gunsmiths that can build him these awesome rifles. He has access and deals with the greatest barrels that money can buy, the greatest bullets, all this stuff. And he has said he still has a flyer. He still has a flyer. It's going to happen. And the real life variables are 20 times more than what Hornady is coming up with in their laboratory. Here's the bottom line. I pretty much fully agree with Hornady's findings. They just published their results, gave us good information. It's good to learn from it. The problem is with people deciphering it without using wisdom, without using common sense. And so for someone to come on my video and say that 3-shot group means nothing, it's statistically irrelevant unless you shoot a 30-shot group or even a 20-shot group, you're wasting your time. That's nonsense. It's data. Take the data. Use Hornady's averages. You can see what it potentially could be at its worst and its best. If I go out to the range today and I shoot a 3-shot group and the SD and the ES look pretty good and I feel good about it, and then I repeat that a couple more times and it seems to be pretty close to the same and I feel like I have a good load, I still know in the back of my mind it could be worse. It could be 70% worse, okay? Maybe a different day, maybe in a different climate, maybe when I'm not shooting my best. I'm fully aware that 1-inch group could be a 1.7-inch group, okay? I'm also aware that it could be better because that swings both ways. It could be a 0.3-inch group. I'm fully aware of that. So when you shoot a 3-shot group, just be fully understanding that there's the potential for a 70% fluctuation between, worse group or better group. It's not going to be the same every time, and just accept that. And you're still basing it off of other 3-shot groups that were worse. But a 3-shot group does have significance. It does mean something. You just need to see if it's repeatable. End of story, nothing else to it. And the nonsense of shooting 30-shot, 50-shot, 100-shot groups in real life is absurd. It is literally, it makes me laugh when I read that comment. No one's going to do that. If you're commenting that, expecting me to start shooting 30-shot groups, you're wasting your time. Not going to happen. No desire whatsoever to do that. Can't afford to do that. Don't have the time to do it. And by the way, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. All this is assuming we're cutting out a lot of variables that you can't in real life cut out. I'm going to shoot bad occasionally. There's going to be a little wind that picks up and then stops, picks up and then stops. So all this is assuming no dramatic variables besides what variables they had in their laboratory, in their little indoor range. But in real life, there's way more variables. So the point is, if I shoot a minute of angle group, I'm happy. I do need to see if that's repeatable. And it does have a meaning. It is statistically valid if my other groups were worse. But I do need to continue testing and see where it goes. Until next time, guys, take care.